On this episode, we find out some of the details of Wilson's past, like how many owners Wilson has had, and what about the years Wilson lived south of the border in Mexico. All this and more on this episode of Wilson, the VW Bus. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Wilson, the VW Bus. I'm your host, Joe Masperi. And this is Wilson, my 1967 pearl white Type 2, former panel but now split window, tin top, homebrew, camper VW bus. I know that's a lot, but it pretty much describes Wilson. I plan on telling the story of Wilson's past in this podcast for myself and for my family and anyone else that might be interested in hearing my stories. I've been blogging and posting on social media for almost 2 decades about my vehicles, and for me, it's a great source and a reference as I get older to help me remember all the things that I've done and share my passion for vintage vehicles. Now, when Wilson and I first met, he had some serious issues. I mean, he had good bones with a rebuilt powertrain and lots of spare parts that came with the purchase, but everything on the sides of this bus, about 1 foot up and about a foot in from the sides, between the 2 rear wheels on both sides, was rusted and basically gone. Bottom of the cargo doors, gone. Outriggers, gone. Jack points, gone. Cross braces, almost gone. The cargo floor cross member ends, they were gone. Now don't get me wrong, it was great to have all the replacement parts to rebuild Wilson, but I literally would need to start in the center of the floor and work my way to the outside of the bus, rocker panels, with no clue as to exactly where the sheet metal was supposed to be in relative space. I mean, this was not going to be easy. Some of the rusty panels were already removed by Dave, the previous owner, too. So I needed to do some research first before I did anything other than just broom out the inside. And research, as you all know nowadays, is a lot easier with the old internet. I mean, we've got the great resources like Wolfsburg West and tons of videos on YouTube, and of course, the Samba. Samba is a great source for getting VW information. So, last episode, we talked about how Wilson came into my life. But what happened to Wilson before I met him? Before Dave, the previous owner, had Wilson in his vast air-cooled collection of German cars, during my research, I came across the information from the owner that sold Wilson to Dave, the guy I got Wilson from. The bus was a white panel van built in Germany and shipped and sold in the U.S. in North Platte, Nebraska, as we know from the sticker on the rear hatch. Now, I also have the original owner's manual folder, which also has some great paperwork in it from the North Platte, Nebraska tag on that too. A few other papers in there. The story goes that the first owner bought the bus for his son, who had graduated high school in, I believe, 1968, and then later went off to Vietnam, but never made it back. At some point, it made it into the hands of a second owner, and then yet to a third owner who had it in Colorado in 1995. At this time, a 70-year-old guy, who we're going to call owner number 4, he bought Wilson in 2001 in Colorado, and daily drove it from that time until the winter of 2010. That old guy, owner number 4, who bought Wilson in Colorado, loved to road trip, and he traveled across the U.S. with it. He camped and lived out of the bus, even in Mexico, for over a year. At that time, the bus was fitted with some of the Westy interior, and it had a sink in it too, which of course helped out the floor rusting issues. Now, although the front windows were replaced with the pop-out Safari windows when I got the bus, I still have the original glass with the Mexican decal granting permission for the Importación Temporal, or temporary import sticker, from November 28th of 2001 until May 26th of 2002. Owner number 4, he really loved this bus, and it never let him down. He was the vehicle that he owned the longest in his life. He was the owner that made Wilson into a camper and installed the first set of hair jalousie windows, one on each side just behind the cargo doors, in the once pristine pearl white panel bus. He added the wood interior panels, the wood headliner and the door panels, Put a soap dish in on the inside of the front cargo door next to the sink that once stood behind the front passenger seat. He also installed a vintage, well, I mean now it's vintage, but probably it was new then, an air guide, which is a round temperature and humidity gauge, which is pretty cool. And I'll talk about that in a later episode. And he had that gauge installed in the door panel, in the front door panel that was next to the soap dish. He decorated the walls with framed photos of places he had been to, like a few farmers in a grass hut and a photo from Hawaii, and also a copy of a very famous photo taken on the 12th of May, 1914, of Mexican revolutionary General Emiliano Zapata having breakfast in Sanborn's coffee house when Zapata brought his army to town for a meeting with Pancho Villa, who had been leading the revolution in the north part of, Mexico. Now, I immediately recognized this photo, not because of its historical significance, and I admittedly know almost nothing about the Mexican Revolution, but rather because the same photo is hanging in our favorite Tex-Mex restaurant not too far from my house here, Jose Tejas, just inside the main door to the left. There was carpet in the rear of the van for that cool 70s van living look, and also this wooden hand-carved figure, which my best guess is that she might be a nutcracker. I can't really figure out what her purpose is, but pretty cool. And I have those photos and the nutcracker. I have them hanging in my garage now. I've kept all of them. This was a definite vibe of cool bus living going on here in the bus that travels around Mexico and the U.S. and eventually settles down here in New Jersey. Now, at this time, it's the summer of 2010, and owner number 5 has just purchased the bus from our road-tripping Mexican excursion owner. If you're trying to keep count, Dave ends up being owner number 6, and I am lucky owner number 7. I wasn't kidding. I had a bunch of research going on here. So I'm the 7th owner of Wilson. So this new owner number 5 here in New Jersey, he states that the engine at this time is a 71 dual-port engine instead of the dingy 1500, and is extremely covered in oil, which I could expect. I mean, it's been run around as a daily driver. The reduction boxes were rebuilt within the past decade, supposedly, and the passenger side rear brakes and wheel cylinders, too. So the last time he drove it, the shifter stopped shifting, and he was convinced it was the shifter bushing. So he got it from VW, and he never did actually figure out how to fix it. So the shifter was a wet noodle now, and that's the first thing that this new owner number 5, addresses. The next problem was the spare tire that was mounted to the nose, and that had to go. That was pretty ugly. And it did ding up the nose. I have a feeling he must have used that spare tire on the front to push some stuff around, because it was pretty dented up when I got it. He installed the new rear urethane shift coupler, and he had to separate the front shift linkage from the rear section and wound up heating the coupler area with a propane torch and then spraying it with a hose to quench it 2 or 3 times until it finally, thankfully, came apart. But he used anti-seize on all the coupled joints for now, and when he went to start it up, started right up, went into forward and reverse, clutch didn't feel bad at all. However, the steering was a nightmare. It was so hard to steer this bus, he could hardly turn the wheel even when rolling slowly. So there's about 25% play in the steering wheel before the wheels even begin to turn. So he drives it up on ramps and greases everything underneath. I think that later he learns that the suspension on the bus has to be hanging down in order to grease it properly, but he figures it out. The headlights work, the horn worked for a second, then it doesn't. The wipers work. The cheesy Optimus radio from the 1990s works, but it's stuck on one station. The turn signals work nicely in the fried eggs. The rear taillights, so-so. And the license plate lights up, so not too bad, all considering. By the end of July 2010, the engine was pulled for inspection and cleaning, and transmission was pulled for the same. The brakes were all gone through and fully rebuilt, and the steering was fixed. Now, I have tons of photos of what I consider to be Wilson's first partial mechanical restoration. This is all from owner number 5. He documented it pretty good on the Samba. At this point, though, he notes that it needs all 4 jack points, all the outriggers, inner and outer rockers, and some dogleg work. The owner is hesitant at this time to put in the approximately like $4,000 in sheet metal repairs. And eventually he winds up selling it, and it winds up in the hands of Dave, our friend at Sweezy Mill Garage on Instagram. Dave takes it upon himself to start combing the swap meets and his vast accumulation of VW parts. He sources the new 1915cc engine and Type 1 rear, installs them, and also lowers the bus with the flipped spindles, 4-inch narrowed beam, and offset lowered spring plates. He also gathers up 4 more of the vintage hair jalousie windows to make Wilson what he is now, an 11-window bus, which, if I can take a minute to discuss, is my absolute favorite look for all of the early Type 2 buses. I like them better than the 13-window and even the coveted 21 and 23-window buses. It's that space in the back, on the sides, at the rear of the bus that gives it such a vintage look to me. I just love the look of an 11-window bus. Like I said before, Dave included almost all the sheet metal that I needed to get Wilson back together again. And now that I've done my homework and a bit of research, I'm ready to dive in and get started. But that, my friends, is a story for another episode. Make sure to tune in again next time to Wilson, the VW bus, when we start to dig into my rust repair and the actual restoration work that I do, and I set my garage on fire. Almost. Thanks for listening.